I'm Nikita. I'm the rabbit's foot in the shape of a trans girl. I think that Nikita Forever, it's like a fairy tale set in a dystopic world. And it's not just a fairy tale, but it's also a documentary. It's like this genetical hybrid of a story but you can also see it as like a film intended for a child on an acid trip. It's like Fear and Loathing in Trans World. When we started making it, it was supposed to be a documentary just about the transition, but I had never felt comfortable in just being one single object of a story because I never wanted to tell biographical stories or, memoirs. I don't feel that I'm that self-indulgent. So I wanted it to be a fiction story as well. And I wanted it to be like tangential to genres that I love, which are like science fiction and fantasy and horror. This is the story of the child's journey into its own secret heart, but also, well, obviously about me too, but without having me be the whole cake. We began working on the film in 2014, and that was the same year I came out a second time, but as a trans woman. Victor approached me because I came out to him, and he wrote me this nice letter where he talked about how this kind of story could be important to other people, and that maybe he would like to make a movie about it with me because we were working on a different project before that. During that anxious summer, I started thinking about the queer journey that's not the straight, narrow, well, not narrow, but not the straight one that comes from one place and ends up in the same place again. But I don't think it's a journey. I think it's a circle in that case. But queer journeys are never circles. Queer journeys are crazy quantum, I don't know, spirals of everything, of chaos. This could be an important story to tell because I think that a lot of people are experiencing it, but don't have, the words or the language. I mean, like not a physical language, but like an artistic language to maybe tell that story. But it could give people like a language to begin experiencing their own journey. I love writing. It's like, that's what I do mostly. I write. I started writing the manuscript together with Victor, and it was a mess in the beginning because we couldn't agree on what it was going to be. It was going to be a documentary. So he started filming me on my first appointment with the doctors or the psychiatrists. And I just felt really awkward about it. So that's when I decided that I didn't want to be the single subject. Object. I said object before. I meant subject, of course. But you feel like an object when you become like this monolith for a documentary or a narrative. And I didn't want to be that monolith. So then we started to mix in these fictitious parts into the manuscript, and it was so much fun, but it was a mess. But I met a lot of people who asked me things that I hadn't thought about, like, oh, so is it okay to work with this non-queer person on this very queer project? Isn't it difficult? And I hadn't really tried to dissect it that way. In the end, me and Victor were just fighting, and I was so mad at him because I felt that he was sort of exotifying me and alienating me and trying to make the movie into his translation of my experience, and that's not what I wanted. When straight people make queer films, it becomes colonization, and it was like our journeys were colonized. They weren't our own journeys anymore. They were always the straight journeys, and always like a safari alongside some sort of queer zoo that they were looking into. And even with the good intentions, and the good intentions are always like the worst kind of weapons that, you know, heterosexuality and heteronormativity has, because you can't really blame it, because good intentions always cover up the fact that it cuts holes into queer narratives and makes it bleed more than it actually does any good at all. When we talk about the trans experience, I think that something that's very important to realize is that when trans people are growing up, you will live in two worlds at the same time, but you spend a lot of time inside yourself, developing an inner world, because the outside world doesn't match whatever it is that you are. And I think that there's an enormous power in that. And I think that it has been neglected for a really, really long time. The queer stories are always considered not a part of, you know, the bigger picture that is existence. The power comes from us being able to infuse the queerness into this other straight body and making it realize that it also is a part of us. We're not a part of it, they are a part of us. So we have equal rights to create in the same amount, with the same kind of, as like the heteronormative parts of other creative teams. Like, I think that utopia would be like a tree that has roots in the ground that you could walk into, and also like these branches that you could reach into, and that all of these things have different kind of possibilities of living lives. I think utopia would be like taking a stroll through a tree, and every branch comes into a different kind of city, but it's also the same being. I mean, it's also the same tree anyway, with all the strange fruits, all the pineapples and pears and oranges, and beautiful tree where people were fighting and we were making new kinds of fruit together. Apple pineapples, orange licorice, I don't know.